Hello, beautiful soul, and welcome back to Rainbow Children of the Light. Today, we're talking about something that I know so many mums of sensitive, intuitive, and neurodivergent children are navigating: anxiety. But today, I want to explore anxiety from a slightly different perspective. Not just what anxiety looks like on the outside, not just the behavior, the physical symptoms, but the possibility that there may be another layer underneath what your child is experiencing. Could sensitivity, intuition, and energetic overwhelm sometimes be contributing to what we see as anxiety? And before I go any further, I just want to make something really clear. I don't believe that all childhood anxiety is spiritual. I don't believe that every worried feeling means your child has, picked up energy. And I don't believe spiritual practices need to replace medical, psychological, developmental, or nervous system support. For me, it isn't one or the other. It's about looking at the whole child, their body, their nervous system, their sensory environment, their emotions, their physical surroundings, and if it resonates for your family, their energetic world as well. Because sometimes our child's anxiety may have more than one layer, and their energetic well-being may just be one of them. I want to begin today with something really personal. One of my daughters seemed anxious from the time she was a baby. I can still picture her so clearly. She would be cuddling her comforter and sucking on a dummy, and she would have these little furrowed eyebrows. She just looked so worried. Even as a baby, she seemed wary, very alert, almost like she was constantly scanning what was happening around her. She was watching, waiting, not completely able to relax in her environment. And at the time, we naturally looked at all the things we could physically see. She did have an older sister who was only about a year and a half older than her, and her sister is very different. She's loud, busy, energetic, and she was very much in her little sister's space. So we thought, well, maybe she just needs more quiet. Maybe she's overwhelmed. Maybe she needs some more space from all this big energy that's happening around her. So we tried to create that for her. We would give her her own little space. We would create activities for her sister so she could have some peace. We tried to make the home feel as calm and predictable as we could. But that anxious quality just continued. It wasn't just a phase of babyhood, it followed her through infancy and into her younger childhood. And then when she started kindy, her teacher was actually the first person to gently suggest that perhaps there was something more going on. She mentioned that she might be on the spectrum. And at first I didn't really see it, though, anxiety, well, autism can look like anxiety in young girls. That's what I was told, and that's what I was told by the pediatrician. So, yeah, it's something that was definitely recognized, but we still went through the process because there were more signs. But, over the years, our understanding just continued to evolve. We began learning more about who she was and how she actually experienced the world, how much she noticed, how deeply she felt things, how her nervous system responded to different situations. And later, when I was able to begin doing energetic healing work with her, I understood that there was an energetic layer again. And from my spiritual perspective, I could see that she was really open energetically and very spiritually connected, and what I would describe as having a porous energetic system. So she seemed to take so much in. It's like a sponge. So that kind of changed everything for me, having that perspective, because suddenly I wasn't only thinking about what was happening around her physically, I was also becoming curious about what was happening around her energetically. Now today, she is a very different child. The anxiety that once seemed to present in her everyday life is hardly there. And I want to be really careful how I say that, because I don't look back and think there was one single thing that changed her. I think we simply understand her so much more deeply now. We understand her nervous system, we understand her needs, we understand her neurodivergence, we understand her sensitivity, and I also understand her energetic system in a way that I didn't when she was a baby. So now I support all of these layers. And that is really the heart of what I want to talk about today. When we see anxiety in our children, I think there's a real temptation to search for the reason. We want the answer. What's causing this? Why is this happening? What do I need to fix? What have I missed? And as mums, especially when we're already worried about our child, we can become completely consumed trying to work it out. But sometimes there isn't just one thing. There can be layers. One layer might be the child's nervous system. Their body might be responding to uncertainty or change, demands, overwhelm. There may be a sensory layer, noise, lights, textures, crowds, touch, busy classrooms, too many conversations happening at once. There may be an emotional layer. Perhaps your child is feeling something very strongly, but they don't yet have the words to explain it. They may have an environmental layer. So school or friendships or family changes, routine changes, expectations. And then from a spiritual perspective, there may also be the energetic layer. And I don't think acknowledging one means dismissing the others. In fact, I think the most beautiful thing that we can do is stop kind of forcing ourselves to choose. It can be nervous system and energy, sensory and intuition, neurodivergence and spiritual sensitivity. We can hold more than one truth about our children at the same time. When I talk about energetic sensitivity, I'm talking about children who seem to be incredibly affected by what is happening around them, even when nobody seems to be bothered by it. Maybe your child goes into a busy shopping centre perfectly fine and comes home completely dysregulated. Maybe they arrive home from school and suddenly everything falls apart. They're angry or they're crying, picking fights, unable to tolerate anything. And you're thinking, where did this come from? Maybe they walk into a room where there's been tension, and even if nobody is actively arguing, they still seem to feel it. Maybe they are deeply affected by another person's mood, maybe a particular environment that feels heavy to them. Maybe they say, I don't like it in here. I want to go home. I don't know why. I just don't like it. Maybe they seem completely exhausted after social situations, or maybe they need a lot more time than other children to feel like themselves again. Now, none of those things automatically means something spiritual is happening. There can be a very real sensory, nervous system, and emotional explanations for all of those responses. But for me, as a mum and as an energy healer, those are also moments where I become curious. I don't immediately decide, oh, they've picked up energy. I just think, is there another layer here? And that curiosity changes the way that I support them. One of the simplest ways I think about energetic sensitivity is through the idea of a sponge. Some people seem to move through the world with quite firm boundaries. They can walk into a room full of noise and tension, emotion and people, and walk out pretty much feeling like themselves. Other people, me included, seem to absorb everything. It's almost as if their system is saying, I'll take that and that and that. And by the end of the day, they are full. They haven't consciously chosen to absorb anything. They may not even understand what they're feeling. They just know that they're overwhelmed. And spiritually, I see some sensitive children a little like that. Not because there's anything wrong with them, not because they are unsafe, and definitely not because I want them growing up afraid of other people's energy. It's simply that their boundaries may need a little bit more support. And this has become a really important distinction in our family. Energetic sensitivity does not mean energetic danger. We don't need to teach our children the world is full of things you need to be afraid of. We can instead teach you're allowed to have boundaries. You're allowed to come back to yourself. You don't have to carry everything you feel. I think that is such an empowering way to approach energy with children. Another question I hear in the spiritual parenting space is, how do I know if this is anxiety or intuition? And this can be a really difficult one because intuitive children can be incredibly perceptive. They may notice things before we do. They may feel uncomfortable somewhere without having a logical explanation. They may have a very strong body reaction. But I don't think we need to label every anxious feeling as intuition. And actually, I think we need to be quite careful with that because if a child is already anxious and we say, you're probably sensing something, we may accidentally make that fear bigger. Suddenly they may think, "Ugh, really, is there something wrong?" So my approach is more gentle. I like to think regulate first, interpret second. If my child is frightened, overwhelmed, or very dysregulated, that's not the moment when I'm trying to work out whether it's intuition. I'm helping them feel safe. I'm helping them come back into their body. I'm helping them regulate. And later, once everything is calm, I can become curious. What is there a pattern? Was something happening in their environment? Was she overstimulated? Was she tired? Was something emotionally difficult happening? Did I intuitively notice something too? We don't have to have the answers in the moment. And sometimes we may never know exactly what caused a feeling, but that's okay too. So, this brings me to something else that I think is really important: your own intuition. So many mums of sensitive children second guess themselves. You can feel that something is off, but then your mind steps in, and thinking, I'm probably overthinking it. Maybe I'm imagining it. Maybe I'm just anxious myself. What if I'm wrong? And I don't believe intuition means we always know exactly what is happening. I don't think intuition has to sound like, I know the answer. Sometimes intuition simply says, pay attention here. And that's it. It gives you somewhere to become curious. So, if your child is experiencing anxiety, you might ask yourself, when does it happen? What happened before it? Is it worse after busy environments? Is it worse after school? Is it worse when the house feels emotionally tense? Is there a pattern? Is my child hungry? Tired? Are they overstimulated? Is there a sensory need here? Does my child need space? Do they need closeness? Do I intuitively feel there is something energetic worth clearing? And you're not forcing an answer, you're just observing, you're listening. And I think there's something so powerful in that. So, supporting the whole child, this is really where my own parenting has changed. Years ago, I would have looked primarily at the physical environment around my daughter, and that mattered. Giving her quiet mattered, understanding her sensory needs mattered, understanding her neurodivergence mattered. But now I look at the whole system. I look at what is her body communicating? What does her nervous system need? What is happening emotionally? What's happening around her? And what am I noticing energetically? And then I support whichever layers seem relevant. Sometimes the answer is very physical. She needs food, she needs sleep, she needs quiet, she needs less stimulation. Sometimes she needs connection. Sometimes she needs help calming her body. Sometimes I will cleanse her energy. And sometimes I call in Archangel Michael. Sometimes I'll use the violet flame. That's also really good. I use these every night, in fact, for both my daughters. And I also call in their spiritual team. And sometimes the most important thing I can do is just sit beside her. This is why I don't want spiritual tools to become another thing we throw at our child every time they feel something uncomfortable. They're just tools. They are part of a much bigger picture. I think many of you watching this already have an intuitive knowing that your child experiences the world differently. Maybe you've known since they were babies. Maybe you look at your child and think, are you feeling everything? Maybe you can almost see the way that environments affect them. Maybe you've noticed that they seem more peaceful after being outside or having quiet time, or after you've done some energetic work with them. Maybe you've had moments where your own intuition has said, is there something else here? And I want to give you permission just to be curious about that, not fearful, not hyper vigilant, not searching for hidden energetic problems everywhere, just being curious. Because there is a big difference between those two energies. Fear says, something is wrong, I need to find it, I need to fix it. Whereas curiosity is more like, I wonder what my child needs. That is the energy I want us to parent from. One of the biggest reasons I wanted to share my daughter's story today is because I remember that little girl, the little furrowed brow, the comforter, the dummy, the constant watchfulness. And I look at her now and she is so different. And I know if you're currently in a season where anxiety is taking up a lot of space in your family, it can feel enormous. You might wonder, will it always be like this? Will this always be our life? Is my child always going to feel this way? Will they cope at school? Will they be able to do things independently? Will they ever feel safe in the world? And I can't promise you what your child's journey will look like, but I can tell you that children change. We learn more about them, they learn more about themselves. Their nervous system, it's still developing, and their communication changes, their environment changes, their supports change, and our understanding as mums change too. There can be so much growth, so much healing, so much possibility, and sometimes the answer isn't finding one perfect tool. Sometimes it's simply understanding our child more deeply, layer by layer. So if you take nothing else away from this episode, I just want you to remember this. Your child's anxiety may have more than one layer, and their energetic well-being can be one of them. We don't have to dismiss what, we see in order to explore what we can feel. We can support the body, we can support the nervous system, we can understand neurodivergence, we can create a supportive sensory environment, we can seek help outside and, when our child needs it. And we can also use the spiritual practices that feel aligned for your family. It doesn't have to be an either or situation. We can support what we can see while gently exploring what we can feel. And I've certainly used this. I've pulled from tools all over, practical, OT. It's been great. So in the next episode, we're going to take from this understanding, we're going to take it to something more practical. I'm going to show you exactly the step-by-step process I use to support an anxious or energetically overwhelmed sensitive child. And importantly, we're going to start with you. Because when we try to regulate our child, we're going to come back into our own body first. I'll show you how I intentionally calm my own system by sinking into my heart space, allowing my heart chakra to expand, feeling my jaw relax, my body soften, and my heart rate begin to settle. Then we'll physically connect with our child so they can become to co-regulate with that calmer presence. I'll show you a very simple finger tracing box breathing practice that we can do together. And once the body feels a little safer, then we move into the energetic practices. So the violet flame, Archangel Michael, and calling in your child's spiritual team. So the flow will be, first of all, we calm, then we connect, then we breathe, then we clear, protect, and call in support. And I think it's such a beautiful example of how we can begin with the physical body and gently move into the energetic. So make sure you subscribe and come back for the next episode where we'll be exploring all of that. So if you've been listening today and thinking, I just have this feeling that there is another layer underneath what my child is experiencing, that is also something I explore through my children's rainbow recalibration sessions. These are personalized distance energy healing sessions where I work with your individual child's energetic system and channel guidance around what may be coming through for them. It's not about applying one explanation to every child. Every child is completely unique, and it's not about replacing any other support that they may need. It's simply another way of looking at the whole child and gently exploring their energetic well-being. You can find more information through the link below if you would like to know more. So thank you so much for spending this time with me today. And if you are raising a child who seems to feel everything deeply, I hope that this episode has given you a little more hope and a little more permission to trust your observations. And you don't have to understand every layer today. You don't have to know all of the answers. Just keep getting curious, keep listening, keep learning who your child is. And, remember, we can support what we can see by gently exploring what we feel. So I'll see you on the next episode for our practical tips, where I'll walk you through the full calming and energetic reset step by step. So I'm sending so much love to you and your child.